We come to another one of our studies in the names of God. We're coming to the end of the series now, really. And we've thought about different names for the Lord, or names of God that you find in the Bible. Thought about how God is one who provides, Jehovah Jireh, the Lord will provide. Thought about how he is one who heals. We thought about that in the name Jehovah Rafika. Of course, there's that lovely name Jehovah Rohi. The Lord is my shepherd. The Lord our shepherd, or our overseer, or our guide. But we're coming now to actually the most popular name used of God to describe the character and nature of God in the Old Testament. And this name is Jehovah Saboath, the Lord of hosts, or the Lord of armies. And often when you read in your Bible, especially the Old Testament, about the Lord of hosts, it will inevitably be this name, Jehovah Saboath. With any concept or theological concept or term or thought in the Bible, often it's first mention. It helps you understand its meaning and its use throughout the Bible. There's an important rule there called the law of first mention. Whenever something's mentioned for the first time, it's important. And the first time we actually find this name mentioned, Jehovah Saboath, the Lord of hosts, or the Lord of armies, it's found in 1 Samuel chapter 1 and verse 3, where, speaking of Elkanah, the father of Samuel, we read that he went up yearly to sacrifice unto the Lord of hosts. So this is the first time that it's mentioned in the Bible. Speaking generally about this name, C.H. Spurgeon, he once said, "Though hosts may be against us, the Lord of hosts is with us." And he's quoting the usage of the name there in Psalm 46 verse 11, "The Lord of hosts is with us." Warren Wiersbe described this name of God, the Lord of hosts, Jehovah Saboath, as the military name of God. Of course, you see that in its usage, or its meaning. The Lord of hosts, Lord of armies. It has the idea of God being there with us, going to battle with us. He's a warrior. He's a fighter, as it were. And so you can see why Warren Wiersbe would say that. Now, the backdrop to the first use of this name for God, it's used some 280 times in the Bible, in the Old Testament. The backdrop is very, very interesting indeed. Backdrop, of course, to the book of Samuel really is the book of Judges, where you have a time really of great national apostasy. And the book of Judges follows a very discouraging cycle. The nation of Israel, they apostatize for a season. They turn their backs on the Lord. They compromise. And then the Lord raises up a judge to bring the nation back to the Lord and back to the ways of God. And after the 14 judges, judges like Samuel and Gideon, Deborah, Barak, and so on, you then read of another judge, the last judge really, Samuel. And of course the book really has its namesake, Samuel, 1st and 2nd Samuel. And in chapter 1, 2 and 3, you have really the incidents of the birth of Samuel. And of course you think about the circumstances of the birth of Samuel. As I said, his dad was Elkanah, and Samuel's mum, or his mother, was Hannah. Now Elkanah was an Old Testament priest, and he had 2 wives. He was guilty of polygamy. He probably married Hannah first, and then when Hannah couldn't bear him children, he then married a lady named Peninnah. You read of this in verse 2 of 1 Samuel chapter 1, where he had 2 wives, Peninnah and Hannah. And you read there that Hannah could not bear him children, but Peninnah, she was fruitful. But it seems that Elkanah, he really loved Hannah. It was probably his first love, Hannah, and it would have broken his heart, the fact that Hannah could not bear unto him children. And you can imagine having these 2 wives in your home. They inevitably they didn't agree. You read in 1 Samuel chapter 1 of Peninnah, provoking sore Hannah. She was always at her. She was always getting at her, the fact that Hannah couldn't bear children to Samuel, or to Elkanah rather, but Peninnah could. And so I want you to see a situation here. It's a situation of national apostasy, turning their backs on God. It's a time of national chaos. But it's also a time of disunity and division in this home. And at such a time, we read of Elkanah, this Old Testament priest, a devoted man, a man who would have been like David, who he was a man after God's own heart. Elkanah was of the same stock. He loved the Lord, he knew the Lord, and you read of him yearly going up to sacrifice to the Lord of hosts, the Lord of armies. And so I want to just think for a few moments today about this incident, that the first time that Jehovah Saboath is mentioned, and think about some lessons that we can learn about God being the Lord of hosts, the Lord of armies, the warrior God, as it were, the fighter, one who goes with us into battle, and one who's even in charge of the battle itself. And just want to leave with you 3 words as I think about this name. The first word is control. Control. As I said, verse 3, we read that Elkanah went up yearly to sacrifice unto the Lord of hosts. I use the term control because I believe Elkanah, as he's going up yearly to the temple, or the tabernacle rather, the temple hadn't been erected at this time, the tabernacle, as he's going up yearly to sacrifice in the house of God, I believe he's calling the Lord of hosts here because he recognized that the Lord of hosts is one who was in control. He is the commander, as it were. The Bible calls Jesus Christ a commander and a witness in the book of Isaiah. And the thought there is of someone leading you into battle. Now when you think about God being Jehovah Saboath, the Lord of hosts, as Elkanah is going up yearly to sacrifice, and I believe that this was not one of the feast times. Male Jews, they had to go up 3 times every year to the house of God for the various feasts of Israel and bring sacrifices and bring offerings and so on. I believe this was a separate time. This was a time of where Elkanah takes it upon himself to personally dedicate himself to the Lord, make a vow to the Lord. And this godly man and this godly Jew, as he comes to the tabernacle, goes from the tabernacle, he recognizes the Lord being the Lord of hosts. He recognizes him as one who is in control of the battle. The battle that Israel faced in its time of apostasy. He would have had the spiritual well-being on his heart. Being a Levitical priest, a Levite priest, he had the well-being of Israel very much on his heart, as a minister would do today, where we have the spiritual well-being of the nation very much in our hearts. Elkanah was a man like that. And I believe that as he comes yearly to the house of God to sacrifice, the first thing I say to you, he's recognizing that the Lord's in control of the battle nationally, but I believe also personally as well. He has a battle in his own home, doesn't he? He has his 2 wives, Peninnah and Hannah, rightly or wrongly, and they're battling each other. And he knows that the only thing that's going to soothe this problem is Hannah bearing unto him a son. And yet he comes and he sacrifices yearly and he's bringing his heart to the Lord. And I believe personally he's recognizing here and calling the Lord Jehovah Saboath, the Lord of hosts, he's recognizing him as one who is in control of the battle, one who is going with him, as it were, as he would go back home, as he would think of all that would face him, all that would await him at home. He's coming with Jehovah Saboath, the Lord of hosts. He's making this sacrifice yearly to him. Child of God, as you think about Jehovah Saboath and you think about all of the battles that you have faced during this time of lockdown and all that you will face the rest of this year, battles in terms of employment, battles in terms of maybe getting the children back to school and all of the upheaval that's going to bring in September. We think about it ourselves as congregations, as our own congregation here in Ballymagurney, the battle that it's going to be to get back up and running normal, the battle it's going to be to have our weekly ministry resume, things like the youth fellowship, the children's meeting, outreach, the ladies meeting and so on. All of these battles that we have personally and the battles you maybe have in terms of your home, in terms of work, whatever it might be, let's remember that we come before one who is Jehovah Saboath, the Lord of armies, the one who will fight for us. I love what we read in Joshua. I think it's there in chapter 10 or 11. As Joshua is going, conquering the land, facing battle after battle after battle with king and with city and so on, we read that the Lord fought for Israel. The Lord fought for Israel. And that's the thing that we think about in Jehovah Saboath, and think about the Lord as the Lord of hosts or the Lord of armies. He's the one who's in control of the battle. He's the one who is the commander-in-chief. He's the one who draws up the blueprints and then executes the blueprints, executes the plan in terms of the battle. So let's remember to turn over the controls of our battles to the one who is the Lord of armies, the Lord of hosts, the Lord of our battles. So the first word, as I said, it's control. The second term I want you to think about is confidence. Confidence. As Elkanah is going up yearly to sacrifice to the tabernacle, and we read there again, verse 3, that he went up to sacrifice to the Lord of hosts. He's coming to the one who's in control, and I believe that he's coming with confidence. Here's a man who knows that he faces a battle on his hands as he goes home. As Peninnah's provoking sore Hannah. Hannah would love children, but as of yet God has shut up her womb. And yet as he comes to the Lord of hosts, the Lord of armies, the one who's in control, I believe that he's actually coming yearly, year on year, and he has this confidence that the Lord's going to intervene. Why else would he come yearly? He's not coming out of dead ritual. This is something he's doing voluntarily, as I've suggested to you. This is something that's free will. He's not coerced to do it. He doesn't have to do it as a male Jew. The other feasts and so on, he had to do this. It was his God-given duty and responsibility as a husband and as a male Jew, as I've said. But this is something he's doing voluntarily. I believe he's doing it because he has confidence that sooner rather than later the Lord's going to intervene. He believes in the Lord of hosts, Lord of armies, the one who will go back home with him and go with him into his battle and also ultimately intervene in this fight that he has in his hands. Child of God, yes, when we think about Jehovah Saboath and we think about the fact that he's Lord of hosts, Lord of armies, yes, we remember he's in control. Should that not then breed confidence in our own hearts and lives and minds? Yes, the future is so uncertain and so unknown for many of us. Health, our finances, how our homes are going to be affected. Let's face it, folks, a lot of it's up in the air. And yet, Jehovah Saboath, the Lord of hosts, he's with us. And not only is he with us, but that should then breed confidence in us to continue doing what we can, to continue doing what we ought, like Elkanah, to continue serving the Lord. When you read of this name, one of the next mentions of it in the Bible, in 1 Samuel then, is David. Of course, the king who was anointed really by Samuel. You remember that fateful day in 1 Samuel 17 where he faces the giant Goliath. And Goliath, he had been bellowing out all of his blasphemies against the God of Israel. And yet in 1 Samuel chapter 17 there, as we read of the battle of the Valley of Elah, David, as he faces Goliath, he tells him, I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts. I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts. You see the confidence that young David has there? His eye isn't on the giant. His eye is on the Lord of hosts, the Lord of armies. And he goes on in that statement to talk about Goliath, the fact that he was strong and he was tall and he had his weapons, he had his shields, he had his army behind him. But here's David and he's so confident. He's coming to Goliath in the name of the Lord of armies, the one who's in control of the battle. Again in Isaiah 31 verse 5, we read, as birds flying, so the Lord of hosts will defend Jerusalem. As birds flying, so the Lord of hosts will defend Jerusalem. The thought there of the birds, and they're just keeping a watch on their young. They're circling around the nest as the mother bird would, keeping an eye on their young, and as soon as they see an enemy, they would zoom in and they would deal with the enemy, whatever that enemy might be. The Lord of hosts is like that. He is just circling, as it were, your situation, and he will defend you if needs be and if needs must. And that should give you confidence then. Confidence to step out in faith and face COVID-19 and all of its uncertainties and challenges. Confidence and control. The last thing I want you to see is communion, or the last word I want you to think about is communion. Again in this verse, 1 Samuel chapter 1 verse 3, he went up yearly to sacrifice to the Lord of hosts. I believe this is a picture of a man in touch with God. And you know, we could point our fingers at the fact that he had 2 wives and the fact that he shouldn't have been a polygamous man. Rightly so. But nonetheless, here's a man who is in touch with the Lord yearly. He is voluntarily offering himself afresh to the Lord, asking him, pleading with him in prayer to intervene. Child of God, continue to remain in communion with the Lord. Yes, there are challenges. Yes, there are battles. Yes, there are fights. But the Lord of hosts is with you, and you need to continue to be in communion with him. You need to ask him to go with you into the battle and recognize his sovereignty over the battle. Continue to be in communion with him. This was something that he continued to do. And even in our daily lives, let's face it, that there are times can be monotony that creeps in. There would have been monotony undoubtedly that would have crept in as Elkanah went yearly to sacrifice, but yet at the same time, he continued going. And it's indicative that he was in touch with the Lord. He was seeking to daily and yearly be in touch with the Lord and offer himself afresh to the Lord. And when all of this is done, beloved, yes, continue to be in touch with the Lord and be like Elkanah. Offer yourself afresh to the Lord year on year, week on week, and month on month. Jehovah Saboath, the Lord of hosts.